Generally, I think it's important for everybody to consume more meat and more protein. I think that we have a population that only gets 16% or so of its calories from protein. And, research shows that if you're light on meat and light on protein, you end up eating more calories overall and more calories from carbohydrates overall and end up less healthy as a result.
Welcome to the Bodies by Brent podcast. I'm your host, Brent Ruska. On today's episode, we have Robby Sansom. He is co-founder and CEO of Force of Nature, a regeneratively sourced meat company based here in Austin, Texas. When I first moved here to Austin, Texas 4 years ago, I had a client introduce me to Force of Nature, and I have been obsessed with them ever since. And if you work with me or you're someone who's lifting weights, protein is so important, and the source of protein you eat is very important, and it goes even deeper than that in this episode. I introduce you to the importance of regenerative meat, and I'm excited for you guys to dive into this episode. And if you want a really easy but impactful program to get really good results, build muscle, lose fat, build strength, my Living Lean program at livinglean.shop is an amazing program that you should definitely grab. And if you ever have any problems with anything in the program or questions, you can always DM me at Bodies by Brent on Instagram. Other than that, let's dive into it. Robby Sansom, welcome to the podcast. Here from Force of Nature. Super excited to have you educate us about meat, protein, and quality of meat as well. So thank you for being here.
Yeah, I'm excited to be here. Appreciate the opportunity.
Yeah, of course. Well, let's just start. Why is meat important? Why is meat important in people's diets? Why meat?
I mean, I think our ancestors knew this, and recent generations have somehow distanced themselves from it. But like, meat is the cornerstone and the foundation of the plate and the diet for us. It offers all of the critical micro, macro, now we're learning phyto nutrients and the right ratios and the maximum bioavailability. It's like the superfood. It is a superfood, and by some, according to some science, the reason our brains grew so rapidly and our capabilities outpaced what you might typically see in evolution. So, I mean, meat is critical to functioning ecosystems. It takes life to sustain life. I mean, the beauty and harmony and romance and balance of the natural world kind of evolves around this cycle of life, death, decay, and new life, and meat's a critical energy driving life force and all of that. And we've never escaped, and we're not separate from that natural world and those fundamental realities. But we certainly are empathetic creatures, and we certainly have the capacity to honor those fundamental laws of reality in a way that maximizes consideration for stakeholders like the environment, or for the welfare of those animals, or for the communities of people making that food, and so on. So, I mean, we rely on and require meat to thrive, and I think that one of our taglines at Force of Nature is reclaiming the legacy of meat, right? Because we think it should continue to maintain that role, and we should also do better at how we raise and practice animals and practice agriculture, so that we can feel really proud of that system and the impact it's having, not just on our health necessarily, but on the world around us.
Maybe that's what happened about 10 years ago when the vegan craze happened. It was an overcorrection of the way animals were treated. And so people went so far the other direction, vilifying meat. I remember there was a period of time where all those documentaries are coming out and vilifying, like that one study came out saying it caused cancer, and then, people, all news outlets run with it and they start vilifying things. I'll tell you a little story real quick. I was backpacking for like 6 months. I was vegan, unfortunately.
Not uncommon.
And I was always experimenting with things. People bring things, you're like, I'm a trainer, so let's experiment with different things with your health. And I remember I was backpacking trying to eat vegan as I traveled. And I was quickly realizing how important animals, what they produce, and their own life force is so important to the cultures in their well-being and their health. And it was specifically when I went on an organic farm in India, and they had gyr cows, and they would use these cows to collect their manure, and they would use that manure to fertilize all of their organic, they had food forests where like 10 to 15 different types of fruits and vegetables would grow. And how I saw this community just be so integrate and live with these animals. And then once the calves got the milk they wanted, they would drink the milk. They would use the milk also to turn it into ghee and cook with it and use it for, ceremonies and all different things, and how just important it is. And then I came back and started reconsuming meat. And then I was starting to get into how they integrated the animal to actually heal the soil, because this farm that was there, they started doing monocropping and they started doing fertilizer inputs, and they were destroying the land. And the two brothers that were like bankers came back and they started to actually regenerate the land by using the animals. And I think that's so important, because you can tell me what you think about this. The soil is where we get a lot of the nutrients, specifically like in meat. Would you say that, that's why regenerative meat is one of the reasons it's so important, is because they're eating healthy soil?
Yeah, I mean, the soil is foundational to the health of an ecosystem and anything that comes out of it. So animals, what they're upcycling is going to have to come from somewhere, and the healthier the soil, the more diversity in that system. Therefore, the more diversity in their diet, and the healthier the components of their diet are, and all of that stuff adds up, and it builds upon upon each other. And there's a ton of research out there to support that. I mean, now my mind's just wandering about like all that goes into soil and everything that you kind of said leading up to that. But, I guess the simplest thing I'll say is, like, you can think about one way to appreciate what soil is like, what comes out of the soil is a reflection of the health of what's under the soil. And if you look at a typical agriculture system here in the United States, what you see coming out of the soil is, for most parts of the year, nothing. It's bare, lifeless. And then for other parts of the year, as a result of a farming practice that incorporates herbicide, pesticide, fungicide, all the sides that are intent on destroying life, you have a monocrop, a single species. Which is not a sign of health, right? Rich, thriving ecosystems are diverse, and it's the unfathomable scale of diversity and life that creates like a hedge and mechanism for balance in nature, and so, put differently, a food production system that is creating very little life above the soil is likely a reflection of there being very little life, and that substrate or that soil not realizing anywhere near its potential to be doing more good. And what's interesting, just as a side thought on that, is like nature's always trying to regenerate itself and return to health. Nature has a ton of things that it tries to do to begin recovering from any degraded state. It is just that our agriculture practices are combative to that desire to return to health. And to me, that's like a fundamental flaw in our food production system. Like, do we want the foundation of our food production to rely on the destruction of life and the disruption of nature's desire to heal itself by creating life? I think there's something broken if that's the foundation of our system.
Yeah, it's being good land stewards. I think I recently heard that the Amazon rainforest is actually like a garden, that it was originally planted as a garden. Like, that's what they recently discovered, that all of that thousands upon thousands of herbs and fruit and all these different things it was originally actually planted by man, which is like the ultimate food forest. I want to go back to when you said red meat is a superfood. What makes it a superfood?
There's a number of things. like I said, I think from a health perspective, um, we think about nutrition as one thing, right? And our grandparents might have been aware of macros, so protein, fat, carbs, and meat has like the right balance of those, particularly red meat. And that's probably part of the reason why our ancestors, pre-developed world, literally followed herds of megafauna or ruminant animals like bison, for example, or the oryx, which is what common to present day cattle would have come from. Our historical ancestors would have followed those herds around, and they would have relied on them. Micronutrients, like all of the vitamins and minerals and things that we're aware of. I mean, meat is rich in those. Interestingly, a guy named Ty Beal did a study called Priority Micronutrients in Food and looked at those micronutrients that human populations globally were most commonly deficient in. So zinc, folate, iron, vitamin B12, calcium. I mean, there's a couple. I think that might be a close approximation of the list. Probably got 80% right. In any case, he was like, okay, let me now see, in order to get a third of the daily allowance of those critical nutrients of need that most of the world is deficient in. By the way, most commonly women of reproductive age. You can just point to iron deficiency as something that probably sparks a light bulb for some folks in that regard. And then said, okay, so for this population of people to get a third of the daily allowance, how much of a type of certain types of foods do they need to eat? And the answer is, to get a third of the daily allowance of those critical micronutrients, you need like 11 calories of liver, which is like a half of a teaspoon, or 200 calories of beef, which is like a really small hamburger patty. It probably wouldn't fill you up. It's just a small amount. It's nutrient dense. You're getting more quality nutrients per calorie. You can extrapolate that on and on. There's a lot of vegetables and beans and corn and rice. Even chicken, you needed to have 1,100 calories, which is like a pound of chicken. Like, there are so many foods that don't give you the load, the nutritional density, and what they do give you aren't as bioavailable or as digestible. Whereas in meat, it's the most bioavailable, the most digestible. Even in the macros, which I glossed over, like, you look at the essential and amino acids and complete proteins. Well, meat has all the essential amino acids in the most complete form of protein. And then what they're learning now is, there are all these phytonutrients, or these compounds, thousands and thousands of compounds, once thought to only exist in plants, that have incredible properties, anti-inflammation properties, anti-cancer properties, get into like anti-aging. I mean, these are the things that you'll go to the, high-end pharmacy that just opened up down the street that has like their biohacking lab attached to it, and you go and buy a jar of these, tocopherols or polyphenols or whatever it is, and you pay like $80 a jar. Like, meat has loads of those in it. If the animals are coming from a system where they were able to graze a pasture that had many, they'll eat up to like 60 different plant varietals at a time, and they upcycle every positive property that and that all of the forage and diet has to offer them, they upcycle and offer to you. And so it's just like, for all of the obvious reasons, we evolved to require and desire and associate with meat, because it gives us everything we need and less of what we don't, in a very efficient form and format. And so we co-evolved to optimally run on meat.
Yeah, I totally agree. With women specifically, why do you think it's important for them to consume more red meat, as well as organs?
Sorry, taking a drink of water there. I think it's important. Like, one, just taking a step back. Generally, I think it's important for everybody to consume more meat and more protein. I think that we have a population that only gets 16% or so of its calories from protein. And, research shows that if you're light on meat and light on protein, you end up eating more calories overall and more calories from carbohydrates overall and end up less healthy as a result. So I think people should be eating more meat and protein. It has a high satiety, meaning it fills you up and you have less cravings for other stuff, which ends up being the junky fillers. But I think women in particular, we've lived in a society that for one reason or another has kind of made it dogmatic for women to eat red meat, and particularly meat in general in the volumes that they historically probably should or would optimally benefit from. I think back to my younger self, going on a date and being like, I'm definitely ordering a steak, and having a date be like, okay, well, I'm going to get a salad and put a chicken, maybe sprinkle some chicken on top.
Yeah. I don't know where that propaganda came from. It was even you saw it in cartoons, Flintstone and get like a big steak and the wife's not eating
100%, and now I'm like, I have a wife, I have 2 daughters. Like I'm like, get the steak, I think it's like, it's so critically important. And you mentioned being vegan and vegetarian. And the number of women I know that have had their cycles stop entirely or incredibly disrupted, major joint issues, major GI issues, hair falling out, like all of the fundamental signs of nutritional deficiency and unhealth, and reintroduced meat into their diet and seen tremendous benefit. Those wrongs heal and had, better hair, nails, skin, all of the other bonuses.
I see it all the time, even before understanding the importance of like red meat, is just training clients when they work with me, lift weights, to get them to have results. Even if they were lifting, their bodies wouldn't quite change. It wasn't until I really got them to start eating a good amount of meat that all of a sudden they finally started to lean out and feel better and stomach issues go away. It's just so important. And you can see how, you're controlling your insulin levels, right? So that less inflammation, less carbohydrate, like desire to eat more calories, easier to control your weight. Yeah. Satiety.
Better metabolic function.
Yeah, exactly. And I've seen it time and time again where women just heal their bodies. And also when carnivore first came out, I was like, this is ridiculous. But then I'm always open-minded. So I start digging and talking to people who've actually done it, meeting people who've been on it for years. And not saying that people listening should do it, but it seems that you can live that way. And the only way that would be possible is if it did have all those nutrients in it. It did have everything that your body actually needed to really survive, at least for quite a bit of time. So, you see people get such good results. Just eating red meat.
It's hard to argue with that. I'm not a carnivore myself. I've experimented with it. I'd probably eat, definitely meat centric, and quality meat for that matter. But for all the people I know that have experimented with different diets, I just gave an example of like countless number of people that have been vegan and had issues. Of all the people I know that have done carnivore, I've never had anybody come to me and be like, oh, that went poorly, or I had a bad outcome or whatever. And I know a lot of people that have been on it for close to a decade and performing at a very high level mentally and, at pretty elite levels physically. So, the inverse though, like you cannot do that on a vegan diet. There are certain things unless you'll
end up starting to supplement with tons of things.
Well, you necessarily, like that's what I was going to say. You can do it if you're the right person with the right composition, which is, the exception rather than the rule, and you have the education and the access to supplement all the things that you cannot get naturally, including some of those micronutrients that are most commonly deficient, like B12. You're not getting that typically from a Whole Foods vegan diet. So it's an elitist idea to think it's accessible to most people,
I say that
or easy to achieve.
I say that all the time. That's one thing I gathered from traveling. I was like, this is a very elitist way of eating. Because if you were to force people in maybe more third world countries or rural areas where they they survive on these animals because they can't just live on rice and grain. Like they can't, and also they're not going to buy a billion supplements to be able to, be kind to animals. It's like, no, the animals are totally part of their nutrition. And without it, and in order to achieve that goal of being vegan, you probably need to be very wealthy and buy a lot of supplements, do all kinds of extra stuff just to be in somewhat of a good health range.
Yeah. So, I mean, going back to the question on why women in eating meat, I feel like one is, all the reasons I just gave, but like there has to be some reaction and oppositional response to that social conditioning that has taken us down a path, or it's been somehow consciously or subconsciously discouraged. Also, there has to be an awareness that, generally speaking, whatever goal you are seeking from a health or fitness perspective will be better served by incorporating more meat into your diet. If it's to lean up, if it's to lose weight, if it's to address an ailment or concerning medical condition, if it's to improve your energy levels and mental acuity, like all of these things are benefited from meat. So everybody should eat more meat. Women who have been historically discouraged or intimidated by it should feel more confident than ever to overcome those myths and to reintroduce it into their diet.
What would you say is the importance of the quality of the meat and the types of quality meat that one can purchase?
I think it's critically important. I think it's important in everything. I think it's important to note that, like, look, people come from different backgrounds, different areas, different situations. Ultimately, eating meat is better than not eating meat, period. But like with everything else where it's on a spectrum, I think that there's a significant difference between, what I would consider to be the meat that we sell, high quality, high claims and attributes, and the more conventional meat, right? On a variety of levels. So, that could be from an ethical, it could be from human health, it could be from an environmental or a social level. The commodity meat system and industrial agriculture system, which is where most of our food comes from, whether it's plants or animals. I always think of commodification as the pursuit of price at the expense of all else, right? Like the goal is cheapness, and you trade off value all along the way. And you can sell, in this case, meat, but also grains. And there's a reason corn's in everything in the grocery store. It's because of the system that props up corn and the subsidies and the government programs that allows corn to flood the market at a price that is less than the cost of production. So sure, you snatch up all of this cheap stuff and put it into all the boxes in the center of the store. Well, yeah, you breed pork and beef and chicken that's raised on that grain or that corn as well, because it's so cheap. We know that, we know it's not healthy for us. We know what it does for animals too. It fattens them up just like it does us really quick. It makes them unhealthy. And I don't think unhealthy animals are conveying the optimal balance of health to us. Those systems tend to confine animals, and I don't think confinement or animal suffering or trade-offs in welfare or anything to be happy about or proud of. The communities of people, the farmers growing those grain crops and spraying all those chemicals have high rates of cancer, high rates of suicide. They lose their land and their legacy and their sense of self-worth. We're extracting not just from the soil health or from the ecosystem, but from the communities of people and their livelihoods and their well-being in a system that is failing them, while it's in turn failing the end consumer by offering them a product that is inferior to alternatives. That product also has the presence of chemicals, agriculture chemicals, pharmaceuticals, pesticides, herbicide. I mean, people know glyphosate. That's an herbicide. Glyphosate is now showing up in measurable quantities in the average American's urine, the average American's breast milk. These are the things that a system, the most common conventional system, has celebrated and been built upon. The other impact is, like we talked about, on the ecosystem as an example. So when you fly in a plane and you look down and you see the checkerboard of the earth beneath you. That's humans disrupting and dominating landscapes to plow and then spray and then try to control it for a certain food. There's an alternative to that where you can produce more nutrition per acre, more calories per acre, improve habitat, improve water cycling, improve carbon cycling, and make more nutritious food in the process. Getting a better ratio of fats, better density of phyto and micronutrients in the food and the meat. You look at, we talked about meat as an example, the diversity of the land they're grazing and being able to upcycle that. I mean, there's been tons of studies out that show spinach today doesn't have the iron, and oranges today don't have the vitamin C, and the vegetables we're growing also aren't as rich and dense in nutrients because we've mined those from our land systems. So, on the regenerative end, you're going to be putting those fundamental systems back into, you're going to be implementing practices that celebrate and allow for those fundamental cycles of nature that create that nutrition and that life to reemerge. And so you'll get that density back. You'll also not be spraying and applying so many toxins that will be in the environment or in the food, and you'll be allowing animals to eat their evolutionary diets, express their evolutionary behaviors, and live in evolutionary consistent habitat. So in combination with diversity of other species and animals and wildlife and habitat. And so, it's like almost like looking at a mirror and looking at the most common conventional form and saying, the opposite of all of this is what the regenerative system almost looks like, sadly. And in terms of the impact, it's like all of these negative externalities, many of which are considered to be existential crises by some folks. It's, major drought, major flood, pollinator die-off, atmospheric carbon levels, nutritional density decline, loss of soil, food scarcity, food security issues. All of these negative externalities that the most common in industrial system produces are all solved and mitigated by a regenerative system, which again works with nature as opposed to against it. So probably a longer answer than you were looking for on that awesome question. But
one example of this when I was on that farm in India is you could see the neighbor's farm that was still, doing fertilizer inputs. And he would tell me when it would rain, because it would rain hard in India, his soil would absorb all the water. And then his would just have this giant runoff because the water would just hit the dirt basically, and it would just flood because the soil couldn't actually absorb it because it was just now mud basically, which was so eye-opening and interesting. I think it'd be interesting to hear about, I want to know meat versus organic meat versus regenerative.
Can I just speak to that last point for 1 second on the soil? Because we kind of talked about it earlier, but so soil is this thin layer that only exists in certain fortunate places on the globe that all terrestrial life relies on. And it's considered a non-renewable resource because it takes, 500 plus years in nature to make like an inch of soil.
Wow.
And in the United States, our number one export is soil because we erode billions of tons every year by leaving soil bare and exposed and turning it up. And so the United Nations, the Food and Agriculture Organization, a handful of years ago said, at the rate we're losing topsoil globally, we may only have 60 years or so left of being able to produce food in the current form and manner because there won't be enough soil left to grow food in the future. And if that isn't alarming enough, we understand less about this critical component of our lives, soil, than we do about the deep oceans or the rainforests. It's very deep. It's very complex. But to that example that you gave around water and running off and so on, most people don't realize that healthy soil is like chocolate cake. Mm-hmm. Think of spongy. Soil has an aggregate structure that looks like a sponge because there's so much microbiological life. And there are these sugars that are gluing it all together to hold that form. That happens because of photosynthesis. So you have a green growing plant and the most powerful energy source in the solar system, the sun, supporting it and taking carbon dioxide out of the air so CO2 goes into the plant, and then the plant spits off oxygen for us to breathe, leaving behind the carbon. So we're drawing down carbon. This is the number one tool for drawing atmospheric carbon out of the atmosphere and putting it back where it belongs in our soil, because our soil has a lack of carbon. One of our biggest issues is we don't have enough carbon in our soil anymore because it's all been emitted. But it puts that carbon into the ground as like a sugar, and that sugar is what is that sticky binder that holds the soil together, that gives it that structure, that lets it hold air and water. So when it rains, all the water goes into the soil and it holds it there. And like for every 1% organic matter in the soil, you can hold 20,000 gallons of water per acre. And our soils used to have like 7% organic matter. And now they're at like 0.5%. So we've lost hundreds of thousands of gallons of water storing per acre. So what you see is water running off. And what I hear is a broken water cycle where there's no longer carbon in the soil. It's in the atmosphere. It should be in the soil. Carbon is life. We're all carbon-based life. Carbon's not bad. It's just you need to have more life in the soil, holding more carbon down there, keeping soil being healthy, functioning. All of this incredible exchange of life happening allows for a rain event to rain and infiltrate and stay in that spot and have hundreds of thousands of gallons there. Now, if it doesn't rain again for months, it doesn't matter because the healthy soil is holding the water in. It also so happens that in some places, the majority of rain comes from the local soil system. Like the water just evaporates, becomes dew, goes up, rains again. Like you have these small cycles that keep water in the system. And if the water all just runs off and never stores in the soil, then you have long periods of drought, and then you only get these big rain events, and none of the water can infiltrate, so it floods. So you literally, by having unhealthy soil, you create drought and flood. So anyway, I just feel like that was like an interesting example of
perfect
of like how these big things that I talk about that sound hyperbolic actually tie practically into what we're talking about here.
Which is important why regenerative meat, because the animals, and you can tell me if I'm wrong, are part of creating healthy soil.
Yeah, I mean, like we think we throw terms around without appreciating what they mean with relative frequency, right? So like we know in Yellowstone, like, oh, the bison are a keystone species. What does that mean? It means like they have a disproportionate impact on the land relative to their size. Bison would have been the largest herd of megafauna on the planet since the last ice age, which is why some of the greatest fertility on the planet in the last 10,000 years exists in North America and the plains systems, all those grasslands, which we have since converted into our food production lands. And, you know, it's that herd of tens of millions of bison roaming from Mexico to Canada and back, symbiotically living and evolving with those ecosystems to the extent that, you know, there are species of animals that existed only because bison have a tendency to waller and make a depression, and that would hold water. And there's like amphibians that would live in those wallers, or birds that would use their fur and make their nests from them. This wildlife doesn't exist anymore. They've gone extinct because we've eliminated the bison. So yes, they are not just fundamental or keystone. You know, they perform a number of and what we would consider environmental services, right? Like there are arid area. Imagine, you know, 1 million bison. Lewis and Clark in their journals would say like, oh, we'd have to wait days for the bison to roam by us while we couldn't make progress on our mapping journey because the herd of bison was too thick for us to progress. We needed to wait. Imagine that density of animals in a relatively arid area. Well, their urine is probably the only water source that land is going to get for extended periods of time. And that's a lot of water, you know. They're grazing. The grasslands evolved to have that, you know, like grass grows and grows and grows and then it dies. And if there's nothing there to eat it or trample it down and compress it down, nothing can grow behind it. It's all shaded out. It's too dense. It can't dethatch itself. So it's either going to be a fire or a huge herd of animals trampling it down. And all the life beneath the soil is the stuff doing the decomposition. So everything needs to be pushed down to the surface so that it can engage in that decomposition. So these things didn't happen by accident. Again, they're fundamental for the healthy functioning of the system. And that's why those ecosystem services that animals provide are essential. Look, when you look to nature, nowhere do you see plants living without animals or animals living without plants. There's always plants and animals functioning in harmony, and generally animals are keystone to being catalysts for some of those systems.
What do you think, in your opinion, is our role as human beings in that ecosystem with plants and other animals?
It's a really tricky question.
But like your feeling about it.
I really do have mixed emotions on it, because if you look at the patterns in the history, going back to like Aristotle, Plato, Mesopotamia, Jefferson, all that, even earlier than that, the Folsom people, and here in North America, the Clovis people prior to that, and so on. Our relationship with food and food production is we tend to live off the land until we over impact it, and then we settle down and start farming. And then we exceed our ability to harness resources, and we have a bad year of drought or a bad series of years for drought, and then the population declines, and then the ecosystem recovers. And then that cycle rinses and repeats like every 1,000 years. I don't want there's a whole rabbit. We could talk for an hour about that, but I think where that lands me is it's very there are no closed loop systems anymore, and we have to find some way of working with nature and finding balance and harmony, with the recognition that it's not going to be perfect, but that we can be better stewards of, again, a greater constituency of stakeholders surrounding us. We have that empathy, we have that capacity, we have the intelligence and the technology. We don't have to have blatant disregard for the impact of our footprint. With the recognition and appreciation that, for us to exist here, we're going to have a footprint. And I do think that I don't know what that necessarily means, to the extent that we're, going to approach 8, maybe by some theories, 10 billion people in the next 100 years or so. Even including the rapid decline in fertility because we're all super unhealthy in the developed world. But I think we have to just get comfortable that we're going to have a disruptive role, and that the world around us changes consistently and regularly. And we need to be really thoughtful about trying to minimize and mitigate and have as much of a positive impact as we can. And I don't think that we've had very much care or concern for that historically.
And that's what's exciting about what you guys are doing is you do care, and you are trying to do what you can in the situation that we're all in. I think the Plains natives had it figured out pretty well. It's kind of like, I don't know, I always visualized that was the greatest regenerative farm there ever was. They'd follow the buffalo and bison, and they would just live with them naturally on a massive scale. I want to talk a little bit about, so when people buy regenerative meat, I want people really listening to understand, how is that different than organic or just regular meat? What was that bison or that cow's life different than the one that just says organic when you go to the store? Why does it even matter, other than there's more nutrients, it's taken care of, there's a soil, but how was that animal treated?
Yeah, I think a couple because your question is predicated on claims. I'm going to take a quick little tangent on that, and then come back to the story behind the food. I think I should just caution everybody that we ought to. I like to, often in life, I find it, a more enjoyable existence to assume the most positive interpretation, or give things the benefit of the doubt. I think in shopping, when consumers go into a grocery store and they look at claims, unfortunately, they should have the opposite approach. They should be the most skeptical. And so, many, or I should say most claims are probably designed to deceive consumers, to give the appearance of offering far more than the consumer recognizes. And that, like, a few examples of that where, common language interpretation of something dramatically exceeds technical or regulatory definition, right? Like when you look at a package and it says natural, they're trying to compel you, who's a well-intentioned person, to buy that package because it seems more natural. I don't have to explain to you what more natural means. You understand, you feel it, right? But practically, it doesn't mean a damn thing. Or because we've been conditioned to think that vegetarian fed is generally healthier. We don't know why. That's just how society operates. They recognize that they could put vegetarian fed on a claim for pork or on a package of chicken, and people would think it was good and they would go buy it, from a marketing perspective. And the reality is the only way that you can put that claim on a package is if it came from a confined industrial feedlot setting where everything about that animal's lifestyle and diet was curated, so you could be sure the only thing it ate was these grains coming off these horrible monocrop fields that they've controlled for. And so, like, I would consider that a red flag, but it's being positioned as a positive. So those are just a couple of examples. I think the popular example is like grass-fed. Like, well, that means it was it's grass-fed. It's like, no, it just means it ate a blade of grass at one point in its life. So,
and I can charge more for it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's just marketing at that point. It's like the same thing, just a different wrapper. And so, like, I think I want to be really careful about claims and saying, like, these are the 3 claims you need, like pasture raised, 100% grass fed, yada yada yada. Like those help. All else remaining equal. But ideally, if you're traveling, that may be all you have to go with. But if you're at home, like, you have to know where your food's coming from. If it's like the meat that you're putting into your bodies, that's the cornerstone and the foundation of your diet, it's probably worth your time to do a little bit extra, because you can have a 100% grass-fed organic ground beef that comes off a feedlot, and is a sick animal living a terrible life, and it's not delivering on your potential. So I think the overwhelming majority of produce or meat or food that consumers get from the grocery store that they haven't grown themselves or have grown by their neighbor dramatically underdelivers what the consumer thinks they're getting, even when, or maybe especially when, they pay a premium for it. So that's my cautionary tale about claims. They're not the end all be all. They have some value, but by my opinion, not much. The last example I'll give on that is, you went out to Rome Ranch. If you took a package of meat from Rome Ranch and we put that brick on the table, and you didn't know that it came from there, and you compared that to something that was labeled organic, and the organic item was $2 cheaper, and all you saw was 2 bricks, one plain, one organic, and cheaper, you would buy the organic item every time. But if you know what's going on behind the scenes, you'd be like, I'm absolutely buying that Rome Ranch brick, 100%, no doubt in my mind, right? And so, like, that's just like, there's things that that claims can't speak to, and the system's not designed to support consumers making the best choice. It's designed to make things a little easier for large companies. Trying to do as little as possible, but get maximum credit for it. So what's the life of an animal and a regenerative? Back to your original question, like, why should somebody pay more? What's a regenerative animal? I would say, like, again, to the same point I just said, regenerative is a type of a claim, and so it could mean a lot of different things. Like there is products in the grocery stores today marked as regenerative that I wouldn't buy and I wouldn't sell and I wouldn't label as regenerative, and I wouldn't source from them and work with them, because my standards are higher and more rigid and more lofty. So what I'll speak to is, like, what we're doing and my ideals and values, or our ideals and values. But yeah, I mean, you're raising animals in a way to address, all that we've been talking about to this point in the conversation, to overcome the limitations and the shortcoming and the challenges of the industrial conventional system and to produce a better product that we can be more proud of, that has a positive impact on the environment, the welfare of animals, the communities of people, and the consumers that eat them. How's that happen? A number of ways, right? In the simplest form, working with nature, not fighting nature. Like looking back to those herds of bison and saying, okay, like how can we emulate that as best we can in a managed setting? It's like, okay, well, you rotationally graze, you thoughtfully and strategically move animals around your land in a way that allows the land to get maximal impact, like a herd of animals would have impacted, but then rest and recover for long periods of time, as that land would have. Not introducing the things that we don't want to have in our food, not introducing the toxins or the chemicals in our systems. That's obviously like having a positive impact on the animal. So, the bison at, say, Rome Ranch, right? One of our sourcing partners, the ranch that I have animals and my co-founder started, those animals live a pretty darn incredible life. They get to be bison, their entire lives up until, they get to be what bison would have been to humans, the native communities that you mentioned. And thoughtfulness is put into like, what's the experience of the animal and how are they living in that system. So part of like these practices that I'm talking about come from some fundamental principles of regenerative agriculture. So I'll just roll through those real quick. Limit chemical and mechanical disturbance. Keep the soil covered and armored. Allow for there to be green growing plants and living roots year round. Ensure animal impact, promote animal impact, know your context. Those are some of like the fundamental principles that you're emulating. I could probably juxtapose that and could spend an hour juxtaposing that to the standard system, but you're looking at like, how do I follow patterns in nature? How do I promote a healthy water cycle to the point we were talking about earlier, to promote a healthy energy or nutrient cycle? It's like, what's happening as we're doing a few of the things I just described? All of a sudden, plants that hadn't existed on that ranch for decades are popping up because the environment and the conditions are right. Now, they went from being a monocrop of grass for those animals to feed to being a handful of species to being dozens. Now the system is healthier. There's more life. There's more wildlife coming in, more birds. Literally, the Audubon, every regenerative ranch I know has more birds than the ranch next to it because they're creating more habitat. Well, that's having a positive impact. All those phyto compounds are being upcycled. They're sequestering more carbon out of the atmosphere, so they're addressing that issue. They're holding more water, so they're addressing that issue. They're creating healthier, not just environment for animals, but healthier food for people, so they're addressing that issue. It's like restoring all of the things that we've depleted in mind from nature through practices that are designed to take the wisdom and guidance and the blueprint that nature put for us and fix it to the modern world, but do it in a way that, works for us, not against us.
Why would you say you care about all this? Like, why do you have such a passion for this? Why did you get involved in this? Like, what is it about, creating healthy food, creating, more sustainable environment, like ecosystems? Like, what is your deep passion? Where does that come from?
I mean, I probably starts with growing up here. I'm from the area in Austin, where we're at, and just love nature. Love going to the coast and fishing. Love going to the hill country and hunting. Love hiking and running and swimming and just seeing it change in my short time here and lifetime, and now thinking to myself like, man, like we're there are some things that we're really messing up. Like I don't know that I want to go swimming in the water. I certainly don't want my daughters to go swimming in the water that I swam in. It's a toxic soup that sucks. And like looking at the food and looking around and recognizing that it's like in some cases it's not doing the good that it used to. It's actually doing harm. And when we started the company, it was like the first year the U.S. announced statistics that said that life expectancy was in decline. And you just look around and it's like, hey, there's challenges. And when you think about the scale of those challenges, right? Again, global, existential crisis, all the things, right? And then and you look at the scale of agriculture, big food, big pharma, billions of acres, like, oh, that's so big. And it's like, but the other side of that coin is that scale of harm and ill can also be a force for good. It can also be, small changes can have massive and profoundly positive impact. So it's encouraging and it's exciting. Like I believe and am passionate that there's an opportunity to address these things. So like, I love the outdoors. I love animals. I see the challenges of the system. Like once you go down the rabbit hole and you learn and you do the reading and you visit and travel, like you can't unsee that. Like it has to be addressed, and we're uniquely positioned to do that. And then you see just how tremendous the impact you can have is. And we decided to try to take it on.
I love your product. I remember when I first moved to Austin 4 years ago, someone introduced me to your products, and then I started sharing them with all my clients. I was so pumped on it because the quality of the meat's amazing. You can see it when you actually take it out. It's like purple. Like it doesn't look like meat you buy in the grocery store. It's almost like orange. I don't know, or a very strange red. And that's when I introduced Lauren to it. I was like, you got to get this meat. This stuff's such high quality. Also, the ancestral blend. Your product is the first product I ever had where it had organs. I think it's got liver and heart in it. And you guys always keep coming out with other products I really love, like the Bison sausages are fucking amazing. And then I went to Rome Ranch and I did the bison harvest out there, which fucking was, if anybody's got an opportunity to go and they're in Austin area, to go do the either turkey harvest you were telling me a little bit about, which I think we should touch on that, or the bison harvest. I think, especially if you have kids or teens, as a family, you should go do it. And I think the impact of seeing how those animals are raised, the animals are processed, and actually get to go through the whole cycle of an animal's life, having the opportunity to go up to the bison and actually put your hand on it after the life's gone, seeing the herd mourn and giving the time for the herd to mourn, however long that takes, and learning about that is amazing. And it really does switch something in your brain forever. I don't think you can unswitch that. And I think that's probably one of the problems with the food system is we're just disconnected. We're just completely disconnected. Can you talk a little bit about the turkey harvest? Because if you're in Austin or in Texas, or you want to fly down here, I'd love people to maybe check out that turkey harvest you guys offer at Rome Ranch.
Yeah, you described it really well. I think you're spot on too. I mean, we are disconnected from our food system in a very unnatural way. If you think almost any generation prior to ours, you would have been much closer to the production of and making of food. And I think, and there's so many things implied in that, but it's not just a disconnection. It's like a deficiency. Like we are starved for that connection, and we don't realize what its absence, the adverse impact of its absence on our well-being. And that's part of the reason why the experience is so profound and uplifting, because it's not just that you make the connection, it's that you make the connection and in some fundamental way, it restores, it like reinvigorates, re-energizes, amplifies your appreciation for the world around you, your connection, your sense of self and identity and awareness. And like it takes something that was atrophied inside you and brings it to life in a more full way. And that sounds like a lot from a single experience, but I think it's because of what is implied behind it. It's because most people interact with their food at a grocery store and they see meat as, an orangey substance.
It's just a product
in a cellophane package. Yeah. And they fail to appreciate the story behind it. And that could be a story of suffering and harm and filth. Or it could be a story like you see when you go to a ranch like Rome Ranch, an regenerative operation, where you see the beauty and the majesty of these animals, and you can just have unbelievable respect and reverence for them. and be in awe of the creation that is represented and in this palette of life, but then also be confronted with the loss of that life. Because if it's a bison harvest, you watch quietly and respectfully and without recording and through a screen, you watch that bison go down, be shot, killed. Or if it's a turkey harvest, you and somebody from the group you're with, typically your family, is gonna, kill that turkey. And that step's really important because facing mortality is something that we've also been shielded from. I mean, that's part of the reason why we prance around as humans pretending that we're not associated with nature. There's like nature and then there's like human world. And it's like, oh, nature is dangerous. It's like, no, like we're in nature. We will die. It takes death for plants to grow. It takes death for animals to grow. It takes death for carnivores to grow. It takes, things have to die for us. And like we have to accept that and seeing something beautiful and majestic and romantic die before you, and then recognizing that your entire life, everything you've ever eaten, every cellophane package, there's been a story behind it. There's been a life behind it. And like what you do matters. You're either supporting and advocating and celebrating a system that aligns with the values that you have or doesn't. And you can't abstain. You can't simply say, I'm not voting this time. Like if you consume, you vote. And you have to own that and you have to face it when you're there facing that. So like the weight of it is far greater than the moment because it implies your entire life that precedes that moment and everything that will follow. And, that we were talking, like that's why I love the turkey harvests, because at least in our country, for most people that have a traditional family that does Thanksgiving, like you gather around to give thanks for your blessings and your bounty, and you don't, absent that connection we just talked about. But coming out of the turkey harvest, you've just formed this incredibly deep and palpable relationship with your food for which you were starved, and you can't help but to share and spread. And like there's a buzz and an energy and an excitement and a recognition that you want to tell everybody, that you then take that food and share it with your family and your friends, and you save the neck and the feet and you make bones. You don't waste anything because that you killed that animal, you know what I mean? And like you have that appreciation forever going forward, and that enthusiasm to become an evangelist for, what we might consider the reawakening of that fundamental connection and part of our human reality that we've been starved from.
It's very spiritual in some ways.
Not necessarily religious, but certainly spiritual. I mean, like,
just spiritual in the sense that it brings you closer to the connection of life, I would say. Like it kind of reawakens maybe the deeper part of yourself to the connection of life.
And I think if you've heard us talking about this and you're like, not a chance in hell, like that's way off-putting, I couldn't possibly go, that's a sign that you have to do it. And I don't say that lightly because I can appreciate, like, I'll be candid, like every one of those events, there are tears. I think that's awesome. I think it's appropriate. I think that's the level of recognition and awareness that you should have. Like, yeah, something will die for you. And that reality, you can't escape it. That's happened up to this point for all human history and all biology, and it'll continue to happen. We can't divorce ourselves from that reality. But we can make sure that death is celebrated and that life is celebrated as just as well. And if it makes you uncomfortable to think about, let alone talk about, let alone go and experience, that's probably means that you have an unhealthy relationship with that fundamental truth and that fundamental reality. And you're probably the right person to go face that, and you will benefit from it. And it, on the other side, I said there's tears every time. On the other side of those tears, at the end, there's always, to your point about it being spiritual, like there's another connection that happens there. And it's like, there's a group of dozens of humans, people in like a tribal setting, and they go through that journey together and form that connection together and come out the other side with having that renewed awareness and appreciation and that connection, that spark first reintroduced, and being in the presence of all those people going through that same experience at the same time magnifies it. And you get that energy and a buzz. And those people that were the most scared and the most concerned and the most crying at the end have the biggest smiles and the biggest, they're the most grateful and the most eager to give somebody a hug or create a connection or tell the story. And so I think that's an interesting part too, to highlight that, you end up going through a lot in a very little time that you can't, it's very difficult to describe or explain until you've been there.
I think a big piece of people having problems with their health is because of that disconnection. And I think if people make that connection again, have that experience, because not everyone's going to be a hunter, but this is an amazing opportunity to experience.
This is definitely not hunting, by the way.
No,
right?
No. But a lot. That's why hunters have such reverence for animals. They get to experience this on a whole nother level, but they get to go through that experience where, unless you are a hunter, when else will you probably see this unless you go to a farm? So it's a great opportunity for a lot of people that will never enter that world.
100%.
And I think if you remake that connection, it will make you look at all food and what it's doing to you and your health and your environment just completely change, or has the opportunity to do that. So that's why I think it's so impactful. Do you have a ranch in Austin or outside Austin, or you just
no, I don't. Rome, so
or you just go out to Rome?
Yeah. So Force of Nature was co-founded, like myself and my co-founders, Katie and Taylor. They're married. We all grew up in Austin together. We've known each other our whole lives. They bought a ranch and moved out to Fredericksburg, and that ranch is Rome Ranch. And there's a herd of bison and a bunch of turkeys. I own a handful of the bison. They own and manage the herd. I pay them a grazing fee. I get, in exchange, I get to come out and do the roundups and go be a part. And we kind of treat it like our home farm for Force of Nature.
Got it.
It's obviously related, but technically, it's a totally separate operation. Yeah. Force of Nature does source bison from Rome, but we also source, bison from other awesome bison ranchers across the country doing really cool stuff at even larger scales. So
I was just curious if you had your own ranch and just had a bunch of animals on it. Because I want to own a ranch and I just wanted to get ranch tips.
Yeah, well, someday maybe. Right now, I got my hands full with two little kids and Force of Nature, but definitely have that on the goals list.
I don't know if this is a weird question to ask, but can you share what you feed your kids?
Yeah,
is that okay?
Yeah,
take us through a day eating for your kids. Yeah, I think this is going to help. I have a lot of women I train that are pregnant or just given birth, or I have a lot of families I train. And I think things can shift once you have a kid. You think of nutrition and eating on a whole different level. And I think parents get confused or they pick simple options or whatnot. I think it would be great to have an example of what your kids eat. Not that they need to eat this way. It's just an example.
Yeah. There's I think there's things that I do that are unusual and things that I do that are not so much. I think at the highest level, I would start with just saying that my older, I have a daughter that's a baby, so she eats breast milk, right? Yeah. That's easy.
Okay.
But my older daughter, she's 3.5, and she eats what we eat. So whenever I make dinner, she eats our dinner. Whenever I make breakfast, she makes our breakfast, right?
So she's not side macaroni and cheese.
Nope, she's not, we're never giving her that choice. We're never giving her, if we ever give her choices, we give her choices between two things that we want her to say yes to. It's like, do you want to brush your teeth first or do you want to put on your pajamas first? You know what I mean? It's not, do you want to brush your teeth?
Yeah.
So I think we're just trying to surround her with the opportunity to help make better decisions. And then we buy books that help read and reinforce that. But breakfast today, we have chickens in our backyard. So we got home, farm fresh eggs. I think it's important that she sees us making food and has that connection and fosters that connection. Today I think my daughter ate, she ate one egg and like 4 pieces of Force of Nature Bison breakfast sausage, like 4 little patties.
Really?
Oh, dude, I don't know where she packs this stuff down, dude. She eats more than her grandmothers do. It's insane.
Wow.
She's a little beast.
Little carnivore.
Yeah, but she has a crazy high metabolism. And that's pretty. And then she was eating strawberries. So like we always have blueberries, blackberries, raspberries, strawberries, bananas. Like we always have fruit, eggs, sausage available like almost every day. Sometimes we'll give her pancakes, but our version of pancakes are like 2 eggs to 1 banana with a little bit of cinnamon. And that makes an awesome pancake. That doesn't need syrup. Yeah, I mean the caramelized sugar from the banana and the consistency comes out exactly like a pancake.
Just blend it up, mix it up, and then
2 eggs to 1 banana.
Okay.
Mash it up, mix it up, put some cinnamon in there, and cook it in ghee or butter.
That sounds amazing.
It's badass. She loves it. On cheat days we'll get like Capello's has these really awesome gluten-free biscuits made with like real eggs and clean oils and stuff. So that'll be like a cheat. And then there's like put some honey or something on there. But like she's never, again, like when I say like on the other extreme, like she's never had a birthday cake. I give her, she's never had a birthday cake. When she gets excited on her birthday because she gets a birthday tomahawk. I put candles in the middle of a giant like 2.5 pound tomahawk ribeye.
Yeah.
Because my mom was like, what do you mean you're not going to have a cake? You can't, like, what are we going to take photos of? I was like, oh, I'll give you something to take photos of. And my daughter loves it. And like when we eat dinner, like if I really want to make her excited, I'm like, hey baby, you know what I'm making you for dinner tonight? And she's like, bones. Like she loves ribs, lamb chops, anything that she can like gnaw on the bone. Like she wants the fatty bites, she wants the cartilage chewy bites, like all the stuff that has the collagen, all of that like the super high nutrition connective tissues. So like somehow we've just reinforced that. The other thing, like from a convenience perspective though, and like Lauren talks about her meat bowls, like I'll go to the store and buy organic frozen stir fry mix or vegetable medley mix or whatever. It doesn't even matter what it is, and then like throw that in a skillet with a bunch of ground meat, particularly our ancestral blends.
Yep.
And in 10 minutes and for $15 feed a family of 4 like a super healthy, nutrient dense meal, and family loves that. So I can go into all other kinds of ways and things that we do or what's in our pantry, but I try to keep it gluten-free, seed oil-free, whole foods. Give her fermented food. My goodness, I can't get this girl to stop eating kimchi.
Really?
Or sauerkraut is what she's into right now.
And I bet a lot of people listening to this are like, "There's no way," but a kid's gonna eat what you give it.
She'll eat. If I open a can of sardines or oysters, she'll come and be like, Daddy, I want some. Like, I can't even, I have to like sneak to try to do it if I don't want her to have some because I want to eat the whole can.
It's going to be so funny, her going on dates when she's older and she doesn't get a birthday cake from her boyfriend. Like, what is this? I need a tomahawk.
But like nobody ever gave her a stigma. We never told her like that she should be concerned with or afraid of these foods. My wife won't eat them with me, but like my daughter, she loves it. And I don't force it on her, again, in some cases to the contrary, I'm like, I want this for me. And then I can't even eat it because she takes it. But, I think being a good role model, I guess, is one thing. And then having her in an environment where she can try things and make choices for herself, but not feel like there's a stigma. Like the last thing I would want is somebody to be like, oh, you're eating what? Ooh. And then for her to think like, oh, I should, instead of trying that, I should not do that. So she's really adventurous. She'll try anything once, and then she'll be like, no, I don't want that anymore. Or she'll be like, I want more.
It'll be interesting to see if the second kid's just the same or different.
I hope so. Madeline, my oldest, she's so easy that way. And so I'm like, oh God, please give me another one.
Please let's just do a second round of this. Full fingers crossed. Robby, thank you so much for being here, bro.
Yeah, thanks, man. It was fun.
I appreciate it. Where does everybody connect with you, find your products, anything to look out for also coming soon as well?
If you are curious, at Force of Nature Meats is our Instagram handle. And I think we are proud that we're putting out really educational and informative content. So I hope you give us a follow and just continue to educate yourself and learn. And hopefully what that does is give you more opportunities to find food that aligns with your values. It's not my job to tell you what to think or feel. It's just, I think it's our job to help you understand what's going on in the world around you and give you the power to make a better choice for yourself. So please follow us. We have a blog as well and a newsletter that I would encourage you to follow. If you are so inclined to want to purchase our items, you can buy it on our website, forceofnature.com, and we'll mail it to your door. Or you can find us in a grocery store. And if you're here in Austin where we're recording, H-E-B, Whole Foods, Sprouts, a bunch of the local co-ops. I mean, we got a lot of products in a lot of places, and then you can find us in some restaurants like Hop Dotty and some others. Again, if we're talking more locally, but on a national scale, yeah, we're available. Again, we'll deliver to your door, and we're in every major natural grocery store all across the country. So you should never be too far, and that's the point. We want to make you. We always say we're trying to create awareness to these issues and then give you access to something that offers a better solution for you.
Awesome. And you have a podcast, so check that out too.
Yeah, Where Hope Grows is the name of our podcast. It's something that my co-founder Taylor owns and drives, and I appear on every once in a while, and we go deep on some of these things. We talked about the principles of regenerative agriculture. I think on our podcast we talked about just that one concept for an hour and a half, and I still don't think we covered it all. So
okay,
we'll get deep on some stuff.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much again for being here, and guys, thank you so much for listening.
Thank you.